Good morning and welcome to this morning's episode of the Amateur in the Morning. I am your host, the Forex Amateur. The date today is the 16th of November and it's a beautiful Monday morning out here in Durban, South Africa. As you know, on these episodes, I like to break down my view of the synthetic markets, right? But as promised last week, that we will be looking at NASDAQ and the dollar index this week, right? So that's the two new additions that we have to our watch this week. So I will be covering those two charts as well. But we're going to start with, the age-old recipe, which is our synthetic indices, since that's my focal point. Before I get into it, right, I hope everybody had a blessed weekend. I hope you spend time with the people that are important in your life and remember why you do what you do, because Forex and trading, financial markets trading, is all about having the freedom to do what you want to do and make your own decisions. So before we get into the serious business this morning, I just want to throw in my little disclaimer there. Remember, I'm not qualified to offer financial investment or even trading advice. That's true. I am not qualified. I know you might think I am, but I'm not, right? Everything I say on these episodes is purely just my own opinion on these markets. Trades that I take are trades that I'm willing to take with cash that I am willing to risk. Right. So if you do make any financial decisions in terms of investing on your own portfolio, remember you need to do it based on information that you have, analysis that you've done, education that you have, and with money that you are willing to risk. Because the God's honest truth is you could lose your entire investment, right? Let's hope that you don't, though. So let's keep our fingers crossed on that one. Let's get straight into the episode this morning. So it's a beautiful Monday morning. I'm really amped up for this week. Missed some crazy moves this weekend, but I did point those out last week. So if you were on the charts, I hope you were able to capitalize on some of the amazing moves that we saw happening this weekend. So we're going to start with the volatility 75. Now, there is a few changes to my watch list, but I think that doesn't apply to you guys right here because everything that I've been covering with you guys is on here already, right? So that's fine. So that doesn't really apply to you guys. But anyway, let's talk about volatility 75 now. I want to start on the weekly chart because I believe that I did speak about this on the weekly chart as well. I had initially highlighted a level here, right in here, which I said was a major level because of all of this activity that we saw in this area here. And I anticipated that price was around here and it was going to come back down into this level and bounce off of that level going back to the upside. And as you can see, that is playing out really well. So price did come back down to this level and it did respect it. I actually had a setup in here as well, which I did send out to the paid group members. So that actually played out really well. Off this level, we got a nice 500 and somewhat pip move off this level. So sorry, 5,000 pips, sorry, not 500, 5,000 pips off this level, which was really, really cool because that's a really good move, right? Now I know 5,000 pips sounds a bit crazy, but that's like small change when it comes to talking about volatility 75. Because with this chart, you can make like 1,000 pips a day on this chart if you know exactly what you're doing. So looking at volatility 75 on the daily chart. Now, remember our overall bias on the weekly is currently bullish at the moment, right? Now, what we can see happening is we can see price doing multiple retests into the zone before it does go to the upside. Because remember, this is a fresh weekly candle. So there's now 6 days of trading or 5 days of trading that needs to happen on this specific candle in here. But I'm going to give you my overall analysis or my entire thoughts on exactly what I believe is going to happen on here. Now, I have been watching this specific level right in here, right? And I've been anticipating that price will be reaching for this level in the next couple of days, right? But that is completely dependent on whether price continues going bullish off this weekly level that I have pointed out on here multiple times, this specific weekly level in there. So that's completely dependent on whether this weekly level holds and keeps price trading above it. I don't know why my pen just changed to that, but please forgive me for that. Let's move on. So that's completely dependent on that level holding as a level of support right here. right? Which it's most likely to do, to be honest, because this has been a really major level. Sorry, I don't know why my chart's all the way over there, right? So this has been a really major level in terms of activity, because we did see that price held over here as a level of resistance, came back into it, resisted, came back into it, resisted, and now it's trying to break out, but it hasn't really broken above this level. But we can see some wicks pointing into that area. So if price continuously fails to break above that, my anticipation is that we will see price revisit this area down in here. Right now, I did have this daily setup in here, which I also sent out to paid members as well in the paid group. And that was for a sell off of this level. Full disclosure, I did jump in on a sell in here last night. And unfortunately, the spread took me out of this trade because, you know, it was a very, very close to my stop loss because I had my stop loss placed right there. So the spread did actually take me out of this trade. Unfortunately, I woke up this morning to see that I am kicked out of this trade. So I am anticipating that we will see price reach for some of these levels down in here. And the reason for that is because price needs to now reach for liquidity. Why does it need to reach for liquidity? Because we've reached a major level in this market, which has a lot of activity. And of late, it's been a very, very strong resistance. After multiple attempts, price has repeatedly failed to break above this level. So this is a very strong key level, and I'll anticipate that it will push price further back to the downside. So my overall target, firstly, would be somewhere down here and somewhere down here, right? Obviously, something there, so we have to see price break below there. So that would be maybe an area where I'd be looking to take partial profits if I can still jump in on an entry for today. So I'll be looking for selling opportunities on volatility 75 today. Looking at the 4-hour chart as well, we do see that this double top formation right in here, right? Now, I don't trade this specific formation in terms of the double top. There's another sort of double top that I like to see. Unfortunately, I'm not really going to point that out on these sessions because remember, this is not about giving you signals. It's about guiding you towards identifying your daily bias. That is the goal of these episodes that I do in the morning. So I'll be looking to see when price pushes down from here, right? I'd like to see it push down quite a bit. And perhaps if we do get a pullback, then I'll be looking to get in on the sell and taking this market back down to around that area. So that's my thoughts on volatility 75. Let's move on to volatility 50. I'm currently short-term bias, short-term sell bias on volatility 50. This is another setup as well that I sent out to the paid group members. I actually sent this out, I think, on Monday, right? So it was a good I think a good 3 or 4, 5 days in advance before price came into this area here. So this was a really beautiful setup, which I identified, right? Unfortunately, because I wasn't on the charts this weekend, I was really busy. I wasn't able to identify this by an instant market execution and get in on this entry. So I actually had a pending order set on this chart, right? As you can see, I had a pending order set on this chart, and this pending order was set way in advance. Unfortunately, it did miss my entry by about 8 pips, right? So I'll be looking to see if we can get a retest into these areas or perhaps a retest a bit lower on this level to see what can happen in that area. But overall, I am targeting over here to the downside, right? We've also got this weekly trend line in here as well, which I've identified where we can get a third touch on that trend line, right? Remember, I did also speak about this wick last week, and I said this wick will most likely get filled. And as you can see, that wick has gotten filled really nicely. So price is now showing signs of weakness at this gray level that I initially identified. So that is one of the reasons why I'm going to be looking for buying opportunities off of that level, right? I have identified that or isolated that to this level right here on the daily chart. So this is what I'll be looking at. If I get further downside opportunities today, I will take them. If not, then I'll just be holding on for that buying opportunity back to the upside. Looking at the H4 chart, however, we do have this level right in here, right? So if we can get price trading back into that area, let me just make it a bit fine tune it a bit so it's a bit more reflective of what I'm expecting, right? So if we can get price coming back into this area, I know it just left this area, right? So it's very probable that it's most likely just going to keep going. But if we can get a young pullback into this area here, then that will be a really, really beautiful trade that I'll be looking to take off that level. Something to the effect of putting an entry somewhere here, right? Putting a stop loss somewhere here, right? And then still obviously aiming for that take profit target that I've just highlighted on the daily. This will be a really beautiful, maybe a 1 to 6, 1 to 7 trade. So I'll be looking at catching something like that. So that's something that I'll be looking at, volatility 50. So looking at volatility 10, another beautiful move as well on volatility 10. So remember, we called buys off of this level down in here, and that is actually playing out really, really well. Unfortunately, price has not reached any of my levels so far. So I initially had a level right in here where I was expecting price to come back to, right? Which it did come back to, right? It did come back to, but I was actually wanting to see it come back a bit deeper into this level to sort of give me a bit more security, a bit of a tighter stop loss if I do jump into the trade. So I can do an entry somewhere there, stop loss somewhere there, and I'll be targeting up in here. For me, it's all about getting the biggest rewards out of the smallest a bit of risk, right? Because I'm very, very uncomfortable when it comes to seeing negatives. And this is something I've identified about my own personality. It doesn't have to be the same for yourself, but for my personality, I'm not comfortable being in negatives. So that's why I don't want to jump into a trade early and then see reds for an entire day before I see blues. I want to see blues within an hour, within 2 hours maximum, and I want to stay in blues for as long as possible, right? Because I get really, really uncomfortable with seeing drawdown. So what I'll be looking at for today, so I've highlighted this pink zone in here, and I would like to see if price can respect that area in there. If it can, then I'll most likely look for a buy at that area. If not, then I'll be anticipating perhaps it might come back into my lower area down here, and it might give me that deeper retracement into this area in here. And if it does do that, then that will be absolutely beautiful. That will actually make my week, because then I'll take that trade up into that area with a stop loss at this area in here, and I'll be looking to take profit somewhere around up in there. Let's move on to 25-1S, right? Because that is something that we also do watch, right? And I did speak about 25-1S last week, and I did say that I was a bit iffy about 25-1S. One of the reasons for that is because my daily time frame was showing me selling opportunities, and my weekly time frame was showing me buying opportunities. And as I always say, if you are unsure, if two time frames are showing you two different things, the most secure, best thing for you to do in that instance is for you to stick to the higher time frame, right? Because my daily time frame was showing me selling opportunities and I couldn't see any clear buying opportunities, I decided to sit this one out, right? So I actually did not participate in this buy, even though it would have been a really, really cool buy to have to actually catch, right? Because when we actually saw it last week, it was actually pushing down from this level in here. So I believe we were somewhere around here last week. So this would have been a really cool buy to take back to the upside. But unfortunately, I could not see any buying opportunities. I could see selling opportunities because price had hit into my sell level in here, rejected, 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 pushed down, broke structure, and this was most likely a pullback according to what I could see, because we broke bullish structure at this area in here. So as I can see, that was a fake out and price came back in. So I'm really glad that I did not take any sells from this level, and I just chose to sit this one out, right? It's not, there is absolutely no shame in being confused. Your number one responsibility as a trader is not making profits. A lot of people are confused that financial market traders are people who make profits and drive Lamborghinis and have big houses and drive Ferraris and have playboy lifestyles and do a whole lot of alcohol and drugs and all of that. And that is not the lifestyle that I would like to portray, right? Financial markets trading is very, very risky. And your number one responsibility as a trader is to protect your investment, right? Protect your investment. So if you have deposited $100 in your account, the goal is not to turn that $100 to $1,000. The goal is to protect that $100 as best as you can. take a limited amount of calculated risk in order to grow it. If the risk is not calculated, then unfortunately you are risking the account, and you are misleading yourself into believing that your goal is to make profits rather than protecting your investment. Why I say protecting your investments the most important thing is because as long as you protect your investment, it gives you another day in the markets, right? And if you have another day in the markets, it's another opportunity. If your model works, if your strategy works, it's another opportunity for you to catch a really clean setup according to your trading model, rather than forcing opportunities such as this, which isn't clean, which doesn't look good to you, which is giving you mixed signals. You end up blowing your account when you could have actually seen much clearer setups, such as the sell trade that I spoke about on VIX 50, or the sell opportunity and the buy opportunity that I spoke about on volatility 75. So that's my focus, you know. Sorry for that. That was just a bit of a rant, but that's I'm really passionate about that. And I have really strong feelings about that as well. So anyway, let's talk about my actions moving forward on volatility 25-1S. Now, my overall strategy still tells me that we're looking for selling opportunities on volatility 25-1S. I know it sounds a bit crazy since the market is going up, right? But I am anticipating that we'll most likely see some sort of selling activity from around this week, because the market is most likely going to be drawn to maybe even full around maybe half of this week before dropping down, right? And then coming back and breaking above, something to that effect, right? So I have this level that I've had marked up on here. And if we do see activity off of this level here, then I will most likely be targeting this level here and expect price to break below it. But it's not about catching the entire move. It's about making profits and going to an area that you can almost guarantee that price will get to. So I'll most likely put a take profit at there, secure most of my position at around there, put a stop loss to break even or something to that effect. I don't really do that very often, but something to that effect. So let's talk about it a bit more. So if you look at that, this is that daily wick, that weekly wick that we see. This here, that's the wick on weekly, right? Now I'll be watching that specific area. The good thing about it is it gives us a zone to work with on the daily chart. So I'll be watching that area right in there to see if we can get a rejection. I've actually sent out a setup to the paid group already for a sell. I'm obviously not going to point out the exact level, right? But a sell around this area in here would be a really, really good opportunity, targeting back down into this area, as I've just said, on weekly, and then ultimately down into this area if we do get that opportunity. Right, really cool, really clean setup. Looking at the H4 chart, not really much I can speak about. Like I said, I always cover the higher time frame charts because this is where I get my evidence for me to start looking for trades. And I like to trade at the minimum a daily setup, right? Because that gives me a really, really good risk to reward, because I identify my setup on daily and then I look for an entry on H4, H1, obviously entering on 15 minutes. So that means I get a really small stop loss, but because I am trading a daily and weekly setup, I'm able to actually get in and out of the trade with a bigger target and a smaller stop loss. So that's it from my side. Not really much more that I can share on these charts. I'm expecting to see a really, really good week going forward. So I'm just going to go and have a look at the NASDAQ chart, like I said, and we will be looking at dollar index this week as well. So I'm just going to go over to those charts and let's chat about those charts really quickly. Give me a second. Sorry about that. Okay, let me just use this account. My other account is taking forever to open, but this is basically, so I basically use this broker anyway, so that's fine. Okay, looking at volatility. Oh shoot, I'm so used to talking about synthetics. So let's look at the dollar index very quickly, right? The reason I chose this, right, is because a lot of the activity on the currencies market revolves around the dollar index. So if you know if the dollar is gaining strength, it's a really good indicator for you to use in all of your trading. If you know that the dollar is losing strength, it's a really good indicator that you can use to guide yourself in whatever trades you're going to be taking. Because if the futures market is going down, the equities market's going up. If the futures market's going up, the equities market is going down, right? If you're not really sure what I'm talking about, this is not the place for it. Make sure you do your research and ensure that you understand what you are trading. One of the biggest problems that I've noticed in Forex traders is that nobody truly understands what they're doing, right? We all understand support and resistance. We all understand trend lines, supply and demand and whatever, but we haven't really done the legitimate research for us to understand what are we really trading? How does it really work? What really moves the market? And as you begin to understand those things a bit more in depth, you'll be able to make much more decisions. The goal is not to make profits as quick as possible. The goal is to make consistent profits. This is very important for you to understand. So let's talk about the dollar index on the weekly chart, right? Now, I've got some analysis on here already, which has actually been on the chart for quite a while because I do follow this very closely. Even in the weeks when I'm not trading currencies, I'm keeping myself in touch, so I always know what's going on. So when I come back to trading it, I'm not jumping into the middle of a story when the princess is rescued from the tower. You know, I'm following the story right from the beginning when Prince Charming is still growing up, and I can be able to get to that point where we meet happily ever after. That's a really weird example, but yes. All right. So let's talk about the dollar index on the weekly chart, and I'm going to draw your attention to a few things. So I've been watching this level in here initially. From around September, August, around that time, right? And I've actually been watching to see, sorry, just give me a second. Okay, cool. All right, so I've actually been watching to see this level to see what type of a rejection. As you can see, I've had an arrow here because I was expecting downside off of that level. Now, I have also been watching this level down here. So my anticipation is that we'll see dollar be very bearish for a very long time. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen instantaneously. My initial assumption is that we're going to most likely revisit this level down in here, give us some sort of a double bottom set up at around that area, and then we'll see this market fly up again. Let me just make this look pretty because it's very important that my charts look pretty. Right? So we'll see some sort of a double bottom setup play out in there. You can see a bit of a reversal channel forming down in there as well. Now, I obviously don't trade channels, but when they tie in with my analysis, I like to point them out as well. So you see a bit of a bullish flag, if you want to call it, or something to that effect. I'm really not sure what channel pattern this is, but something to that effect, right? So I'll expect some sort of a double bottom type of setup off this level, pushing dollar back to the upside. So short-term bearish bias on the dollar for the remainder of this week. Or even next week, who knows? But we do see that this week in here, and as you know, as I continuously mention, is that when the price leaves wicks, it's most likely going to be drawn to filling that wick, right? Now, looking at this level in here, I will most likely expect, as you can see, price. Has the US market even opened? I doubt this is today's candle. I honestly doubt it. Oh, it's actually today's candle. Wow. Okay. So we can see that the market did leave a gap on today's candle, right? You can see the difference between the closure of Friday's candle or the low of Friday's candle and the open of today's candle. So we can see a slight gap in there, which the market is most likely going to be drawn to filling, right? So just be careful for short-term bullish momentum in the market for the earlier part of today, right? And then perhaps later part of today or into tomorrow, something to that effect. Expect the market to be drawn back down to the downside. So expect something like maybe a pull into around these levels in here, right? And then expect to see this market trade back down, give us a double bottom setup here, and then see it pulling back up a bit more, give us a double top setup down there, and then maybe push back to the downside from there, right? So that's a bit confusing. I know it can be a bit confusing, right? But short-term buys on this level, right? And then we'll see the market probably trade down and give us this double bottom setup off the bottom there. What I hate about MT4 is that there's no arrows, so I have to use like lines. But looking at the weekly, you can see that this is what I'm expecting. So push down, right? This is weekly, push up. But remember, on the daily, we'll expect something like a double bottom here, push this market up to break this trend line that's forming here. Let me just do that, right? To break this trend line that's forming here, something to that effect. Doesn't really look very clean. I really don't like the way it looks. Maybe we can draw it from somewhere around there. Yeah, something to that effect, right? Don't really worry about the trend line, but anyway, I've covered my thoughts on that. Let's move on to NASDAQ. Looking at NASDAQ on the monthly chart, firstly, I just want to start on the monthly chart, right? NASDAQ on the monthly chart, a couple weeks ago, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I posted a setup on Instagram for a buy off of this blue level in here. And as you can see, we didn't really get a retest into that area this yet, but we did get one touch into that level. I would expect another push into this area, to be very honest, right? But let's see how that happens, right? But for now, we are short-term buyers, and I will expect price to be reaching up in there. This is something I also posted on my Instagram as well, right? Looking at this weekly chart, not really much we can speak about on here, but we can identify that price has this bit of a upward trend line developing in that area in there. So we will expect, you know, price to come back to this trend line perhaps, and then push back to the upside. Now, this also ties in as well, because if the dollar gets stronger, we'll most likely expect the Nasdaq markets to get a bit weaker as well, right? Because if futures go up, equities go down. So looking at here, we can see that we've got this big wick in here. And as you know about wicks, for me, I believe that wicks need to be filled before the market does anything. So I'll be very careful to watch if we can see bearish momentum pushing this market down. Now we can see on open that the market did open and it is currently trading to the downside. Let's look at the daily chart. Looking at the daily chart, there are some key levels that I had highlighted in here that I've been watching over the past couple of weeks, which are basically highlighted when price was down here, identifying bullish moves. I was looking for a retest into this level, which also played out really, really nicely as well. I'm obviously not trading NASDAQ at the moment, and it's just my elective. And we can see that from here, perhaps we'll expect to see this gap get filled when we see New York market open. And then once this gap does get filled, whenever it does get filled, we'll expect to see this market being drawn towards this high, which I have pointed out on the weekly and the monthly chart, right? So that's my thoughts on NASDAQ. If you have any questions, any queries, any comments on any of the setups that I've shared on here, be sure to post them down in the comments, right? Because like I said, this is if you're watching it on YouTube. So just be sure to post it on the comments, and I'll be happy to address it maybe on tomorrow's video, or even respond to the comments if I do get a chance to have a look at them, right? Cool. So this is slightly longer than I would have actually liked it to be. But the truth about it is, because I covered 2 new charts, I wanted to go a bit more in depth into them today, so that from tomorrow I can just sort of flow from the initial foundation that I've set today. So I'm going to cut it off on that note. And, you know, as always, it has been a pleasure to share with you guys. And I am wishing you a blessed and a profitable trading day. Catch up with you guys again tomorrow.